And this is a very, very interesting topic to me. I have never been in an audience when, by a show of hands, including ministers, when the speaker is asked, by a show of hands, raise your hand if you've been experiencing or resisting the symptoms or temptation to depression, where the response hasn't been at least 75%. 75%. So we really want to get our arms around it. It's a topic that in certain sectors of the Christian community is somewhat taboo to talk about. Some people just kind of want to brush it under the umbrella that if you had more faith, you wouldn't be experiencing it. But clearly we see through the scriptures that it's something that many Bible characters experience. We see Moses experiencing it. We see Jonah experiencing it. We see David experiencing it. Paul experienced it at times. So we don't want to make an idol out of it, nor do we want to give ourselves license to not check our thoughts, which lead to how we're feeling, which lead to the manifestation of depression. But at the same time, we don't want to be so glib about it that we push it under the carpet or brush it under the carpet as though you're the only person who may be dealing with it. So it's very, very important that we get our arms around this. Now, it's critical to understand, listen to what I'm about to say very carefully. This is how we're going to start today. It's critical to understand that Satan can't dethrone God in heaven because Jesus already won the victory, according to Colossians 2, and he spoiled principalities. He made a show of them openly, Colossians 2 tells us. So Satan can't dethrone God in heaven. So what he seeks to do, listen carefully, is to dethrone God in your mind. He seeks to dethrone God in your mind, and he tries to use the vehicle of your emotions. Now remember, the word emote means to role play in a theatrical manner. And we've said this before. Thoughts are the script, emotions are the actors. So Satan seeks to attack you. He seeks to send innuendo, propaganda, to try to dethrone God in your mind, because he knows he can't dethrone him in heaven. Now, this is critical to recognize because I would never minimize the degree of attack that I've gone through or that you've gone through. But before we talk about even some of the more extreme attacks or extreme challenges we experience, there's a term called catastrophizing. 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 And it's when we have the temptation or engage in irrational thinking so that we start to believe that things are far worse than they really are. For example, say you're a salesperson and you go a day in the field and you don't make a sale. Well, when you catastrophize, the conclusion you reach is that you stink or that you're terrible, when in reality it just may be an isolated day, an isolated performance. And what happens is, if you're not careful, you can start to project those irrational thoughts onto the future, so that it at times can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You start producing the behavior that you fear. Listen to Proverbs 15:15 for a second. It says, all the days of the afflicted are evil, but he who is of a merry heart has a continual feast. Listen to this in the Amplified. In the Amplified, it says, all the days of the desponding and afflicted are made evil, listen carefully, by anxious thoughts and forebodings. But he who has a glad heart has a continual feast, regardless of the circumstances. Let me read this to you one more time slowly. All the days of the desponding and afflicted are made evil. Notice how they're made evil according to the Amplified Bible. They're made evil by anxious thoughts and forebodings. In other words, there's this undercurrent, there's this background music that it's always going to be bad, or nothing's going to turn out right, or I'm never going to meet the right person, or I'm never going to be able to save enough money, or I'm never going to lose weight, or I'm never going to get control of my finances, or I'm never going to break this generational curse. It's made worse by anxious thoughts and forebodings. So we want to be careful, because what the enemy, remember, he can't dethrone God because God already has the victory. What the enemy wants to do is dethrone God in our minds. Now you have to understand, according to Isaiah 14, according to Ezekiel 28, Satan is hopeless. You have to understand, he's the father of depression, because he has no hope. No matter what he does, he will never be able to reverse the poor decisions he made in Isaiah 14 and Isaiah 28. Therefore, in his effort to dethrone God in your mind, he wants to reproduce that seed in your system of hopelessness, despair, anger. Remember, he has no future. His future is torment. His future is the lake of fire. So his objective is to dethrone God by trying to attack you. And yes, there will be attacks. 2 Timothy 1:7 says to fight the good fight of faith. Other scriptures talking about how we wage a good warfare. Ephesians 6 talks about put on the whole armor of God, the breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, the belt of truth. Have your feet shod with the gospel of peace. Notice the Bible's very clear that there's a warfare. And the way he does it is by trying to dethrone God in your mind. This is why he endeavors to attack your finances so aggressively. Because few things give Satan as much ammunition to have an accusatory attitude towards God as the feeling that he's absent in your finances. This is why he attacks Christian marriages. This is why things probably got tougher for you, not easier, since you got more committed and sold out for the Lord. Because he's trying to dethrone God in your mind. Listen to Hebrews chapter 12 in the Amplified. Therefore, then, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses who have borne the testimony to the truth, let us strip off and throw aside every encumbrance, unnecessary weight, and that sin which so readily and deftly and cleverly clings to and entangles us. And let us run with patience and endurance and steady and active persistence the appointed course of the race that is set before us. Here we go. Looking away from all that will distract us to Jesus, who is the leader and the source of our faith, giving the first incentive for our belief, and is also its finisher, bringing it to maturity and perfection. He, for the joy of obtaining the prize that was set before him, endured the cross, despising and ignoring the shame, and is now seated at the right hand, a place of victory, the throne of God. Here's where I want to get to in the Amplified, verse 3. Just think of him who endured from sinners such grievous opposition and bitter hostility against himself. Reckon up and consider it all in comparison with your trials. So that, here we go, I read all of this to get to this one verse. So that you, Chris, you, Dennis, you, Edmay, you, Adrena, you, Tracy, you, Janique, you fill in your name, so that you may not grow weary or exhausted. Here we go. Losing heart, relaxing, and fainting in your mind. Wow. Look at these adjectives. I could stay on this the whole night, but this is not my subject matter. It says, so that you don't grow weary. Remember, why does it say you don't grow weary? Remember from last week, our word picture. Our word picture of depression is, depression, as we said, one of the definitions is anger turned inward. We said our word picture is just like if you were on a treadmill and you were running at some point, some of you could do 2 minutes, some of you could do 5, some of you could do an hour. At some point, you would run out of energy physically. Depression is when you get on a treadmill, an emotional treadmill, and you run out of energy emotionally because you keep turning things over and over and over and over on the inside of you. And we said the key is, and we're going to circle back to this momentarily, but this is a good time to bring it back to our remembrance. The key is to realize that negative emotions consume energy. Depression has been defined as anger turned inward. We say that's a powerful definition because anger is the highest consuming emotion you and I can consume.